Good, great. All right, thank you so much for coming down here to help celebrate water with me. Isn't it fantastic that it also happens to be International Water Day, right? So Water Day, what does that sort of bring up? It's sort of like, well, are we here to celebrate water itself or our relationship with water? See, water is so important to us in so many different ways. We rely on it for life, in terms of being able to drink it, but we also rely on it for all the services it does for our environment. Having healthy water is crucially important to so many people on this planet who derive sustenance from it, from our rainforests and reefs, but also who travel great distances to get it from the central parts of our countries. We are all connected to our oceans, and we're here to celebrate those sort of connections. Great. So, where did it all begin? Our relationship with water, right? Please forgive me, if you can't read these, I will go over these sorts of things. Don't squint too much trying to understand these. I will cover them. They're just sort of a little prompt for me as well. So our relationship with water goes back, and particularly sort of deriving sustenance from it, goes back a really long time. Back to we had Scandilopetra divers in Greece, people who would ride big rocks down to the bottom of the ocean to be able to collect things to eat. We have indigenous cultures, such as the Moken. If you may have seen on some of the BBC documentaries, the people who sort of go down and they can open their eyes and see really clearly underwater. We have the Bajau Laut, which are another indigenous population who live in the South China Sea, who have developed sort of physiological sort of things that allow them to hold their breath longer, like enlarged spleens and greater tolerance of carbon dioxide. So they're genetically different to us, right? We have the armor divers of Japan. You may have seen the pearl divers. So they spend their entire life out diving for pearls, right? So we have this sort of history of living in and around water. So today's talk is about not only our relationship to water, but how we can kind of develop, right, an even greater affinity to water. How do you feel about water? We're going to explore that in a bit of a practical sense later. So if you're feeling a little bit nervous, good. Right? We're here to explore what nervousness, anxiety, and fear do. So I was wondering if you could help me out a little bit here. If I tell a joke, a bad joke, right, some kind of dad joke, right, like we're going to dive into the deep end of this one, I want you to all stare back at me and just sort of be really awkward about things. Just sort of like, that wasn't funny, right? Just snigger, whisper to a friend, right? Because I think that our connection to water and immersing ourselves in water, right, is about allowing ourselves to feel uncomfortable. Good, you're doing really well at it. Great, thank you. Cool, awesome. So what gives me authority to talk about these sorts of things and how you can best immerse yourself in water? I'm going to talk about a little bit of a project that I did and how I explore water, and we'll go from there. So I am a marine scientist. I worked for a while helping collect data and do all that sort of things, and found this fascination with the marine environment, and that sort of led me to explore our changing oceans, right? So we were trying to figure out, what our impact was, how what we were doing was affecting the oceans, and whether that was a good or a bad thing. I then went to work. I thought, well, this is a really important thing that we all need to know about, right? We need to know about how our oceans are changing. We need to sort of see what we're doing. So I wrote a TV show, as you do when you're 20 years old. And I thought, well, let's not just aim small, let's go to the top. So I started reaching out to people, and eventually they ended up with Discovery Studios over in New York. And I thought, fantastic, this is great. People are interested in this kind of thing. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go around the world when they liked it and start working with different indigenous cultures throughout different parts of our oceans and explore how they connected to the world and what they were seeing changing. And it was really quite alarming what was happening. So there's some cultures who rely on certain sort of things happening, like the migration of animals that they would normally eat, stopped happening. right? And they're going, oh, well, I mean, that's bad because we can't get food. But a step beyond that, we start losing cultural connection to our oceans. And that was important to me. So we started exploring what happens when our food web starts to break down, right? If we lose the connection to the food web, we lose that part of the culture which appreciates that. So the preparation in those indigenous cultures to be able to go out and access those food webs, right? So I sort of did this, explored these relationships, right, and put this project together. There's me in the Solomon Islands playing with some of the kids. These kids spend their every afternoon going out to catch their own food, right, and in the oceans. Me travelling around. A lot of these places that I went to were really, really difficult to get to. So we had to use like cargo vessels. I know that this one used to go through the islands once a month. So if I was stranded wherever I was doing these sorts of shows, right, as doing the research, thank you for the applause. It was really difficult to get to. When you were there, you relied on the indigenous communities to be able to help support you. So a lot of the research, I didn't have a lot of funding. I couldn't bring all the food and supplies with me. I had to kind of go, well, I'm here, I'm going to live as them. That means I had to catch my own food. I had to live in the shelters that they do. Again, thank you, that's great. You're a lovely singing voice. Right? And wherever I went, I was trying to document our sort of place within these systems. So here's me. I was actually looking at the floods at the time in this village and how when we had these floods, all of the fresh water would sweep all these branches and insects down to the river mouth, and all these fish, you might have seen archerfish. Archerfish sort of collect at the bottom of these river mouths, and the local people were catching them, and they knew where to find them because they would sit there and just watch the surface of the water until you see the little spits coming up. If you see an archerfish, they have this groove in the top of their mouth that they use by spitting, or they channel water through it to spit and knock bugs back out of the water. So I spent 3 or 4 days sitting motionless in a creek up towards Papua New Guinea with crocodiles and eels and all sorts of other things in there, hoping that I would eventually have an archerfish swim right up to my camera to be able to do that.
The thing I find fascinating about archerfish is that they have to calculate the amount of force they use to knock these bugs off. They don't want to knock them too far because other fish will get them. So what they do is they size up the insect and then change the volume of water that they squirt in order to knock it down.
Science. Great. So part of being able to sort of take these sorts of things and go and explore these relationships meant being part of the communities. Here we go. This is what I waited 3 days for. Oh, sorry. Anytime now. Anytime. Oh! 3 days. Nailed. Great. So part of the time spent here, and the difficulty in getting these kind of things is what led to that intimate connection with the cultures. You see, the longer and more time you spend in these cultures, the more you get to explore the day-to-day life of these people, and you get to sort of feel what it's like to be able to be as they are. And what I noticed is that they think about the water very differently, right? When they go into the water, it is a part of their life. And when I came back to Australia, I started to realise that we don't necessarily think of it the same. Like, we go into the water to enjoy ourselves, but we don't necessarily think that it's our home. Right? So I started going, okay, well, how do I change that? Because these people would do anything to protect it. Right, so I started going, okay, well, how do we break down the barriers? How do we start to feel about water as if it was our home and it was the most important thing to us? So here's another project that I do. I don't know if you can see that very well. It was about communicating with whales, right, and using body language and knowing that we have a common language, between us and all the things that live down there. Right? If we can show the similarities between us and the animals that live down there, then we can kind of realize that we're not that different, right? Cool, so how did I do all these things? a lot of being in the water, right, was exploring what it feels like to be in there. And this sort of thing, if I want people to connect with water, we need to sort of break down the fear attached to being in there. How do you break down the fear of being in there? Exposure, that's one of the big things, yeah. It's contextualizing the fear. See, we have a lot of apprehension because we're fed second-hand information. How many of you have read a newspaper article where we sort of say, oh, there's sharks and, don't go in the water. And because of that, you kind of grown up going, well, I'll only go in up to my knees. Right? It's pretty common. I teach a freediving school here, and one of the top things that people are apprehensive about is about sharks. And I'm like, well, I've been diving off Sydney now for 5 years, and I've seen one shark. It's not very realistic to think that if you go in anywhere below your knees, you're all of a sudden going to be attacked. But because this is the information that we're given, we don't necessarily challenge it. Right? So I'm going to start taking you guys through, right, contextualizing that fear. Part of contextualizing that fear is understanding that we have inner strength and we have the capacity to challenge that fear. Cool? Great. So this is kind of... So I was meant to talk about this in the Solomon Islands, and this is a little video about how living in those sort of unique places allowed us to feel comfortable underwater. You can see here I'm not using any tanks. It's about relaxation. It's about appreciating the environment that we put ourselves in. It's about feeling free, allowing yourself to connect differently, being positive about our experiences. Who gets a feeling of freedom watching that? Who gets a feeling of calmness? Who thinks that I'm any different to you? Well, yeah, look, and I get this all the time, I am no different. I started just the same as you did. You are all capable of feeling this exact same thing. Right? We are all human, and this is what I'm gonna sort of break down for you. We all have this power, right? There's no reason that you can't do what I do. There is no reason that you can't hold your breath for 6 minutes or go to the bottom of the ocean, stand there and appreciate the beauty. Absolutely no reason. The only difference is how we approach our connection to water. It sounds crazy, right? So, let's have a look at it. Oh, sorry. I've jumped ahead of myself. This is the movie, part of the movie I did.
No matter where you live on our planet, you're connected to the sea. Yet in my lifetime, half of all marine life has disappeared. This is a hidden crisis falling on silent shores.
1, 2, 3, go! The marine world that I knew, no young person will ever see it.
They're now one of the most threatened animals on Earth.
There it goes.
The ocean has done so much for us. Now there's an opportunity to do something meaningful for the ocean.
We can save our ocean, but it requires action.
This is our home, our future.
When you hold precious life in your hands, you can't help but feel we can do more.
Good. Just as an aside, if you haven't seen Blue and you would like to see it, it is actually screening at the Oceans Festival coming up in Bondi. So if that sort of did interest you and you are kind of interested in exploring what's happening to our oceans, jump onto the Oceans Festival sort of website, have a look through there. I think they are having a couple of screenings. Cool. So, enough about me. That didn't come up. Over to you. Right. So, first of all, I'm going to get somebody to come up here and we're going to get them to hold our breath. Volunteers. Great. One here. Arthur. I'm going to borrow you for a second. And the other volunteer? Yep, fantastic. Come on down. If we're going to feel comfortable with water, we have to feel comfortable being uncomfortable.
Sounds great.
Great. Awesome, right? And this is really cool because, our brain has a capacity to be able to turn that same sort of rush, it's cortisol. When we feel fear, when we feel anxiety, our brain produces cortisol, right? In our basal brain, our emotional brain, we start to go, fight, flight, freeze, right? And it's normal, right? And you're going to feel this, right? When you start holding your breath, you will all probably get to a point where you go, I feel really nervous, I don't know whether I can continue holding my breath. That's normal, it's okay, we all do it. We're all going to experience this anxiety together, right? Good? Yeah. Fantastic. Let's feel what that feels like, shall we?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Are you ready, Arthur?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So on the count of 3, right? I would like you to take a very big breath in. And hold it. Good, I can see people shifting around in their seat a little bit. Starting to feel a little uncomfortable. Starting to focus on the discomfort. Good. People still starting to push through. Hands up if you're still going. Couple, good. Good. Of those people, hands up if you're still going. Couple more, great. Good. Good, good, good. Arthur? You're not allowed to breathe through your nose at the same time. Good. All right, we didn't have all day. All right, so what you probably would have felt is that as you held your breath, right, we got increasingly uncomfortable, right? Yeah, and then as you became uncomfortable, you started thinking, oh, geez, this sucks, right? Yeah, and then all you can kind of eventually think about is, I wonder how long I've been holding my breath for, right? I sure hope I've held my breath more than that person I talked about whatever this morning to. And then you're going, oh, I held my breath better than that. I'm doing good about this. You feel better for a second, and then you're like, oh no, I really need to breathe again. And you start focusing on this, and this negative sort of snowballing effect happens, and the anxiety starts to happen, and then you start fighting it. You start tensing up. You start going, oh, all right. That is our basal brain activating and going, oh, all right, I'm feeling anxious. I'm not used to doing this. Fight it or run away from it. Why did you breathe in?
No other options at that point, I guess.
No other options. Well, you could have kept holding your breath.
That was the other option.
So why did you breathe in? I had to. Arthur, why did you breathe in?
Because, it's the only thing you've got. It's the only thing you want to do.
The only thing you want to do. Good. That's great. Fantastic. It is a want, right? Because holding your breath hurts. It does. I don't like it. It's an emotional decision though, right? Because could you keep holding your breath?
Yes.
Yes, you could. Great. Yeah. So why didn't you?
Oh.
Because you don't like it. right? And the more we don't like something, the more we focus on not liking something. The more we focus on not liking something, the faster our heart beats, the more tension and stress we start to hold, right? And then the quicker we feel out of breath. What do you think makes us feel like we need to breathe? Yes! It's not a lack of oxygen. It's not. Right? It's actually the like habit. Habit does it and carbon dioxide does it. Now I've got a little challenge for you, right? There is a piece of paper at the front and I'm going to do a little demonstration with you about what I do to get these images, right? It's about understanding discomfort and moving through discomfort. Arthur, you're going to do the same thing. Arthur, I'm going to get you to go to the front of the room. You're going to stay here with me. Okay, great. Yep, quick.
Timing you.
All right. What I'm going to get you guys to do is I'm going to get you to take a really big breath in. Right? And then we're going to walk. Now you're going to walk down here to the front and there's a piece of paper with a question on it. Arthur, you're going to go from here, take a big breath further down the stairs. Right? There's like a 10-meter dive. Right? I'm going to get it. You take a big breath in and then Arthur, you're going to walk all the way up here. And then you're going to draw something beautiful. Right? Same sort of thing. You're going to go down there and it says, draw something beautiful. Are you ready?
I'm not an artist.
Now, no, that's okay. So the important thing here, Arthur, no cheating, right?
When do I breathe?
No,
Never.
So you're only allowed to breathe once you get back to the spot that you were in.
This spot. Okay.
This spot right here. I'm going to stand right here.
Cool.
Okay, you ready, Arthur? Yeah. Okay, ready? Big breath in. Okay, you can go, Arthur. Yeah. So at the moment, right, it's hard to focus on being creative. It's hard to find those sorts of particular things because all you're thinking about, right, is like, oh, this really sucks. Right, I'm feeling out of breath. Now, Arthur, remember, oh, he's died. Quick! No, she's coming back. Hold your applause for the real Victor. Have you breathed in yet? No? Fantastic. I hope you haven't cheated. Well done. Big round of applause now. Awesome. Congratulations. How did that feel? Good, because we're going to analyze the picture in a second.
Oh, okay.
Okay. You can actually...
Bring it with me.
No, that's fine. That's fine. People can look and critique on the way out.
Oh,
okay. All right. This time, right, what I'm going to do, Arthur, you can actually relax, because that looked very stressful for you. Okay. I would like you to wear this for me.
Yes.
Finger out. Can I just grab another volunteer up here? Nicole. Fantastic. I have a job for you. Can you turn this one around? Okay. Can you read that little thing there?
Yeah.
Right.
60.
Other way around.
99.
Yes, that's a percentage oxygen. On the other side.
87.
Right. Heart rate. Good. Now, why did you feel uncomfortable and have to breathe in before?
Habit.
Well, that's one of the things, and you didn't like it. But we have other options, right? This is about feeling comfortable with being uncomfortable. And the way that we move from the part of our brain that goes fight, fight, flight, fright, freeze, like this kind of thing, is we start going, okay, let's contextualize the fear. Do we have information that enables us to start looking at the impulse to breathe and separate it into an emotional and logical decision? Yes, we do. Right? So when you start feeling uncomfortable, when you're down there doing a drawing and you're like, I really need to breathe, I want you to look at this little computer and go, wait a second, I'm feeling the impulse to breathe. I know that I have carbon dioxide rising up, right? But if I contextualize it and I understand where I am and I choose to positively put myself into this experience and I have the information to tell me that I have more oxygen, I can calm myself through the anxiety. Nicole, I'll get you to walk with her, and while she's sitting there looking at it, I want you to read her oxygen levels for us.
Wait, that's the
this one here, the 98.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, that's
So let's
good.
calm.
I don't
Okay,
know if I
cool
can
blue. You can breathe.
I'm not breathing again.
Sorry? No, you're doing the same thing, right? But now there's another little thing next to it. There's another piece of paper, and that said, write something beautiful. Good. Okay.
Oh, down there? I
Yeah.
think I just stole it.
All right, let's go.
Okay. Big breath in.
No, we're going to run out of time.
Big breath in. And away you go.
Bye, everyone.
Okay. So this is what I do for a living. I have to be creative under pressure. As an underwater photographer, as a cinematographer, when we're working on the thing, I do it all on breath hold. Right? And this is very applicable to what you do. I think you all have very, very stressful lives. Right? And it's very easy to start reacting to these stressful situations, right? And start going, oh, right, I feel flustered. How many of you have a deadline that you need to work towards? Right? And all of a sudden, that overwhelming feeling of anxiety starts to trigger that part of our brain that starts shutting ourselves down. Right? We need to be able to find a way to be able to move beyond that. Contextualize the fear and the anxiety that we feel. Right? And once we can contextualize things and give ourselves other information, like, I am actually okay. Right?
97.
97, well done. So did it feel like you really needed to breathe?
At the very
Was it a nice drawing?
I mean,
Yes, it was.
It was
an
good.
artist. But it was
Could you have spent longer?
I've had some colored pens, you know.
Could you have spent longer with this? Because you had 97% oxygen. What did it feel like you had?
No. I didn't know how much oxygen I usually have.
No.
It's good.
So one of the challenges we have with going into water is reacting impulsively, right? So when we go down there, when we start putting ourselves in there, we let the fear and the anxiety start to come over. What we need to do, if we want to start to understand fear, understand pressure, understand, our relationship with water and being a part of water, is start looking at choosing to be in there, understanding what happens to our body, right? Providing ourselves with logical information to be able to go through it. Well done. How did that one feel?
Good.
That's good.
Did
You realize that even when you felt like you really, 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 really needed to breathe, right, you still had 97% of your oxygen still left?
I'm not going to die.
How does that? No.
I'm not going to die.
No. We found logic to overcome that base emotional reasoning. Okay? That's what that challenge is. And once you get that, you can do amazing things. Round of applause. Right. So once we do these things, once we start contextualizing fear, we can start pushing ourselves deeper and deeper. We can start dealing with challenging situations because we can go, wait a second, I chose to be here. I started putting myself in a position, right, where I need to logically analyze where I am. I have information that I can start breaking down the impulse to breathe, the impulse to react, right? And I can start going, okay, well, if I have information and I choose to put myself in that situation, I can be logical about it. Great? So, there's a little bit of thing about understanding our brain. It's basically what I've talked about before, contextualizing things. If you do have any questions, I'm happy to talk about these later. I am just sort of running out of time, so I will sort of go through this a little quicker. Here's some examples of what we do. Right? Well, this is what I sort of do. So this wreck here, right, it starts at the top of it, it's about 1 meter deep, and it drops all the way to about 36, 37 meters deep. Right? So for me as an underwater photographer on breath hold, right, I have to take a breath at the surface, swim all the way down to nearly 40 meters deep. Wait for the subject matter to swim into the place exactly how I want it. Then swim all the way back up to the surface, just like you guys did, right? Except that the whole time you're down there, we have to logically think about our feelings. Am I okay? Do I have more information? I know I feel like I need to breathe, but I know I still have more oxygen, right? We have to deal with wildlife on their terms. Things can be scary. We can have sharks. Those sorts of things happen. I'm choosing to put myself in these situations. I'm okay. We have information to not react to. I want to go from my emotional brain into my logical brain. We can put ourselves in very tight spaces, right? We can commit to things that need to happen very quickly because we go, okay, I'm okay under stress. I've planned for anxiety. I know that we're going to have anxiety, right? I'm going to recognize it, right? I'm going to contextualize it. I'm going to move through it. if you plan for anxiety and you have mechanisms to be able to control it, right, by providing yourself information to go through it, we can go through it. Right, here's some of the caves that I swim into. These involve going down about 15 metres deep, then about 30 metres up into a cave, right, with no ability to go to the surface. Sit there holding your breath, waiting. Then swim all the way back out again and up again to breathe. Right? These things are possible because we're dealing with fear. We understand and we embrace that fear. We relax through that fear. And here's being a bit creative. So once we overcome fear, right, once we learn to embrace anxiety, we can start to be creative. We can allow ourselves the time to acknowledge anxiety and go, you know what? I'm okay with it. Right? And that's when really beautiful things happen. Right? Because if you're comfortable feeling uncomfortable, you can get through anything. If you get used to putting yourself out there and being uncomfortable, right, nothing really matters anymore. You can stand up in a crowd, and this is terrifying, by the way. Like, I swim with great white sharks. I've hand-fed, big Pacific whalers over an underwater volcano as it's erupting, right? But nothing is as terrifying as being able to stand up in front of a crowd of people and be critiqued. But you can do it if you're used to feeling comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's the big lesson today, right? If you put yourself out there, right, as I do with water, and learn to feel comfortable being uncomfortable, right, and you plan for anxiety, and by giving yourself information to rely on when you start to feel anxious, we can allow ourselves to be creative under pressure. Great? That's my little take-home message for you guys. Okay, so I hope that you have enjoyed listening to what I do, exploring my life and my little sort of creative process, and that my art and my creativity is as much about understanding how we feel inside to be able to be creative, right? And these are a little dark to appreciate here, but if you do ever want to have a look at these are all my Instagram if you want to have a check out. They're all possible because we understand and move through fear. Cool? Great. I'm sorry that had to be a little bit rushed. Here's a little video of defying again gravity and all those sorts of different little things. A connection with water. Sideways bubbles! Fantastic. Cool. Great. All right. There you go.
Guys, we're going to do a bit of a Q&A. The wonderful Streamtime have given us some socks. Where are my socks, guys? Yeah, and so for anyone that has a question, we'll give you beautiful socks designed by one of our previous Creative Mornings speakers, Jason Little. So while we're getting the socks, and if anyone does need to go, just quietly head off. But we will do a bit of a Q&A now with Lucas, and then I have ta-da! These beautiful socks. There's two. But I'm going to start with the first question. So I would like to know, I don't know, talk us a little bit more about the photography that you do under the water, and obviously like you get yourself to a point where you're holding your breath, and but is there like a moment, a beautiful moment you want to share, or a hilarious moment or a scary moment where you got the shot or you didn't? I don't know, something like a moment.
Yeah. So one of the big challenges I was doing at the time was finding a way to be able to get really, really, really close up shots of sharks. Now, traditionally, sharks don't necessarily like scuba divers because of the bubbles, and they're sort of scared of that kind of thing. So everything had to be done free diving. And I was doing a bit of a story on indigenous hunting in the Solomon Islands, and we're like, okay, great, cool. I know where we're with the sharks, and I know I have to do it all in breath hold. And then they're like, no, we need you to get really, really, really close. And And we went out to this spot. We had like a couple of other cinematographers who came out to film me filming the sharks. And I'm like, okay, cool. We went to this spot and there was nothing there. I'm like, okay, this is a bit challenging. Let's go a little bit further, go to another little place. Not there. Okay, well, if they're not there, they have to be at this one other spot, but it's pretty deep. And we got there and there was a big sort of bait ball going on. There's a lot of activity and the sharks are sort of there. And so you're like, okay, cool, let's calm everything down. And part of being able to stay really, really still and doing these long breath holds is getting completely relaxed. So when you get down to the bottom, you feel all those urges to breathe as you went through before. You need to, instead of reacting to them, like and from a fear perspective and tightening up, you have to completely relax, right? And remember taking this big breath, and it's probably about 25, 30 meters down, instead of going all the way down. And I'm waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And then, the sharks start becoming curious. They start getting closer and closer and closer and closer. And where we are, right, is this volcanic area, right? So there's this underwater volcano that I talked about not too far from there. And I'm waiting, and finally these sharks come right up here. And I'm about to, I'm filming. And as it gets to about here in my face, the volcano goes off. And the volcano at the time is like, it's like a door, right, that's going off. And it's like a seismic creaking door. You can feel it in your chest, you can feel it in your back, your whole sort of body shakes. And the thing is that the animals are there, they never really get quite used to it either. Any of these things just gone boom, taken off, and basically, hit the top of my head, everything's blah, 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 shot ruined. And I was like, I waited for so long for that shot. And you kind of realize that, things are out of your control completely. You have to, at every time, stop, go back, refocus, try and regain that relaxation. So, yeah.
Hey, who's got a question? Okay, 1 and 2, and you guys get the Streamtime socks. There you go. All right, we'll start with you.
So I've been clearly inspired by what you've talked about today. What are 3 baby steps for people who have never done this before to start to hold your breath underwater?
If you want to learn to hold your... Yeah, so if you want to learn, right, to immerse yourself a little more, to hold your breath a little longer underwater, right, you really need to do it in a safe way, and that is actually going to learn from somebody who needs to teach you. There's unfortunately a lot of misinformation on the internet, and some of those things are quite dangerous to do, right? So we need to get the correct information. So first of all, see somebody who really knows how to teach somebody. But I would not be afraid of allowing yourself to feel uncomfortable, right? Feel what it feels like to be uncomfortable, and imagine that you've got your hands in front of you. Your right hand is emotional and your left hand is logical, right? And every time you choose to either give up because you didn't like something, move your hand and embrace that in a positive way, right? Or move your left hand to logically hold your breath a little bit longer, right? And then breathe back in, right? And own your decisions, reward yourself for your decisions. Because if you go into everything with positivity, right, rather than negative, like fighting to get there, right, that reward and ownership, right, allows you to continue contextualizing fear in a positive way.
Cool. So I'm curious, it seems like the freediving is part of the creative process as well. How did you come to that? Because logically I would think most people would be using scuba tanks and equipment. How did it turn into freediving, or was it always freediving?
So freediving for me was something that I sort of did prior to my photography. I kind of we were stuck at how to get certain images, and I was having all these interactions with the wildlife, and I was like, well, just give me the camera. Because you can't do this on scuba. You can't do this in any other way. And where I go to, and the remote places, I can't bring all that equipment. So I was sort of doing that first, and then out of kind of frustration, I was like, just give me the bloody camera, right? And then it sort of developed. And so when you do look at my images, if they were done on scuba, they're kind of like, yeah, it's nice, it's pretty. But it's not what it is for me. And when you sort of understand the effort and energy that goes into being able to capture an image in that way, right? That's what it is for me. Like, I can take that image on scuba and it wouldn't mean anything, because it's just like, yeah, I can go down there. You know, I mean, still scuba has its challenges, but it's not as physically demanding. There isn't the practice behind it, which I really enjoy. Pushing my body to the limits, right, and my mind to the limits, able to create that beauty under that pressure, right, is what makes me personally connect to the images that I take. And I hope that you guys get that same sort of thing with whatever you do, you know, like any creative process. It's not about the image, it's how it feels to create it for you, and that's where a lot of it gets its value. Cool? Great.
Guys, give Lucas a huge round of applause.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
No, that's okay, no worries.